Welcome to another Cleverdix podcast. In this podcast, we talk to Corrina Connor. Corrina is another amazing New Zealand swimmer from Wellington. She started off competitive swimming when she was just 10, gave it up for a while, and then really got back into swimming while living in London. As people who've lived in London knows, it sometimes gets cold, and she developed an affinity for cold water swimming there. Well, she came back to New Zealand and over various times has done the New Zealand Triple Crown and has done some other amazing swims. Most recently, she was the support swimmer for Mary from our last podcast when she did the 10K Taupō Epic. It's a wonderful talk, and Corrina is a fantastic person. I think you're going to love this one. In some other news, we've also teamed up with Swimscape. Here's a little bit more about Swimscape.
Cleverdix is New Zealand's largest swim-focused podcast, and our team at Swimscapes is proud to be their official partner with all things swimming. Swimscapes offers boat piloting and safety for solo marathon swims, as well as various packages including marathon relay swims, swim camps, and swim adventure holidays. Swimscapes is also a facilitator of the Auckland Triple Crown, coming soon. Proudly brought to you by Swimscape.
Okay, well, welcome to another Cleverdix podcast. In this podcast, we're talking to Corrina Connor. Welcome, Corrina.
Hello, thanks for having me.
Oh, we've been waiting for ages to have this one. Cool. So the way we normally start is we just give you an opportunity to give us a little bit of your swim story and kind of introduce yourself. So let's go for it. What's your swim story, Corrina?
Well, I learnt to swim when I was pretty young. I think I was about 4. I started having swimming lessons when I was, a baby. And I had lots of swimming lessons. I didn't join a swim club till I was 9 or 10. And then I was pretty into competitive swimming from then until when I was 17. And then I finished school and I finished swimming because generally that's what people did if they weren't going to go to the Olympics. And I had other things to do. So, and then I didn't really do any swimming at all for quite a long time, well over a decade. And then I was living in London, and I lived over the road from a beautiful outdoor pool, Brockwell Lido. And I used to go to the gym there, but I never went in the pool. And one day I saw this triathlon club training there, and I thought, it looks like they're having fun in the water, so I might go and give it a go and see if I can still remember how to swim. And luckily I could after quite a long time, after 14 years of not really swimming very much. And that was when I really started swimming again. The great thing about Brockwell Lido is it is an outdoor 50-metre pool. It's completely unheated except for the sun, and it's open all year round. So as it moved into winter, the water got colder and colder and colder. But there were quite a few people in the triathlon club who also liked cold water. So I think that's where I got my cold water thing from. And so I think the first winter I swam with them, we tried to do 50 meters per degree once it was under 6 degrees. So we'd do 6 lengths. And then by the second winter, the ante had been upped and we were doing 100 meters per degree. And it was good fun. It was quite cold. And so then I did some tours of other cold water pools, and it was good fun. I really enjoyed that. I didn't really enjoy the warming up. I mean, we didn't warm up very scientifically. We just put on lots of clothes and went and drank coffee. And sometimes 2 people climbed into one sleeping bag just for some sort of. So I had quite a few reflecting. I had quite a few nasty after drop experiences. Luckily, I lived over the road from the pool, so I just used to go home and hop into bed and lean against the radiator and hope that I survived. But and in fact, the day before I moved back to New Zealand, which was about this time in 2016, I had my last swim in the pool, and it was about 3 degrees, and I didn't really want to get out because it was my last one. And I stayed in for far too long. And that really interfered with my final bit of packing the night before I was leaving the country, because I had to spend about 3 hours in bed warming myself up.
I can just imagine it wasn't so much packing as just tumbling everything into a suitcase.
Yes, exactly. Yes. And then finally, at about 10 o'clock that night, I thought, I better finish this because I'm leaving the country tomorrow.
How
Yeah.
far was that last swim?
Oh, it was quite a long way. I think it was about 1,200 meters at 3 degrees.
Wow.
So it was, yeah. And I mean, we just had the lifeguard there, and I think they just expected us to go up and down until we got out. So we're in stress. But it was a very, very cold day. And I remember when I got out, I was talking to my friend, Tawny, who was also a big cold water person. Well, she still is. And we discovered that our hair had frozen. It was all crunchy from the.
Have you ever
It was
had
quite cold.
No.
It's an interesting sensation. Yeah, and then I was back in Wellington in 2016 and joined a couple of different squads and then met all the open water swimmers, the Wellington open water swimmers. I hadn't really swum much in the sea before then. I think I did one race in Wellington Harbour when I was about 13 with another club swimmer, and we got in and thought, oh, we're going to get pummeled to death in here by all these triathletes. So we just did breaststroke the whole way around the course so we could see where we were going. Yeah, but since then I've obviously got a bit more involved in open water swimming and racing. And yeah, so that's my story up until now, I suppose. Yeah.
Well, to be fair to say, you've skipped out some big chunks. So we might dive in and ask a couple of questions, but
Sure.
you definitely have a little bit of a reputation as being sort of queen of the ice, Corrina. So whatever you learnt in the UK, well done. It's served you well.
I mean, looking back, I think some of our antics weren't particularly safe. I went up to Hampstead, or rather Parliament Hill, Lido, which is another beautiful pool. It's cold again, but it's all lined with stainless steel. So when you're swimming in it, it's like being in some space age thing because all the bubbles are reflected. Amazing. And I went up there on one very cold day in early December to have a bit of a play. I thought I'll do a few lengths and then I'll get out. But it was so beautiful. I stayed in for far too long, and then got very chilly waiting for a train because it started to snow, which is not a good follow-up for an icy swim.
Yeah.
So then spent a long time in a cafe looking a bit pale and peculiar, but it was all right. I did survive. But I don't recommend. I think the way we do it here is probably a bit safer.
Well, it's definitely become a bit safer as the years have gone by, right? Because I know even when we started doing it, I can remember we used to sort of go and find cold water, jump in before work, get out of sort of like a 30-minute type swim in maybe 8 degrees at that stage was the coldest we could find. But to your point, right, you're shivering and you're sort of trying to get used to all of this. And we would get dressed up in our cars, shivering, and we'd hit the highway like shaking. And, if we'd have pulled over by a cop, we would have got locked up, I'm sure, because we would have looked like we were on something, right?
Yeah.
In fact, we had an experience here. We did what was named the Cold Tour. Simon Freeman organized it a good couple of years ago, and our very first little dip when we got down to Queenstown was just in the local Queenstown bay or beach. I don't know what you call it. I can't remember the name of it. The lake. Yeah. But there was probably about 8 of us or 10 of us, and we sort of all got dressed after our swim, and we walked up, 2 blocks into town, all shivering and shaking.
Yeah.
And Simon opened up the door of a bar or a restaurant, and the dude, like the doorman, said, "No, you guys are out of here." They wouldn't let us in because obviously we looked like, I don't know what we looked like, but yeah, right. They sent us off down the road. So
yeah,
definitely a little bit safer these days. Okay, so you have a couple of hobbies, Corrina. You are a musician and you are a swimmer, and you, as far as I understand, you work as a research assistant and a librarian, right? So you got like a lot of stuff going at the moment.
Yes. Mainly at the moment, I'm just working in the library. I work for Wellington City Libraries,
Yep.
and mainly in a temporary pop-up library just off Lambton Quay in Wellington, because we're waiting for the central one to be reopened. It's been closed for earthquake strengthening for quite a while. So that's where I work day to day, and I do some other things on the side as well. So music and some research. Not so much of that at the moment, but yeah, I'm quite busy.
What's the music? What's the music scenario? That did you study music? And I mean, is that also a lifetime passion?
Yeah, so I did music performance at university here in Wellington for undergraduate, and then I went overseas and I did a postgraduate performance and music history course degree. And then when I came back to New Zealand in 2016, I did a PhD again in music history. So there's been quite a lot of music going on. And I play the cello and the violin. Those are my instruments.
Okay, I've got a challenge. So
yes,
you're going to come down to St. Bathans this year, correct?
I am. Yes,
and I'm assuming you're going to crank out another ice mile.
That is the plan. Yes.
Excellent. So as soon as you finish, we're going to hand you a violin.
Oh.
And we want to hear you play the violin on your ice recovery.
Yes. Can I put some clothes on first? Is that?
Yes,
that
you are
okay?
welcome to put some clothes on.
Yes.
And you could put a hot water bottle maybe under an armpit or two, but we want to hear what that sounds like.
Yeah,
I'll
give it a go.
That's bound to make some headlines.
Yeah, but the last time I saw Corrina get out after a cold swim, she got out like she'd hardly,
That's also true. She's a lot tougher than us.
She's so much tougher than me,
Okay. So how much time do you spend practicing cello?
Not very much. Not enough.
Just enough.
It's a funny thing. It's I think when you're little and you're learning an instrument, you have to. It's like cleaning your teeth. You have to do it every day.
Okay. Well, once you figure out how to do it.
Yes, I mean theoretically you still should, but now it's more a case of when I have things coming up, concerts coming up, then you crank up the work.
Okay, so you do swim more than what you practice cello?
Yes, I think that would be fair to say. I do at the moment.
I'm just checking that we're on the right podcast. That's perfect. 100%. All right. I'm going to dive into the New Zealand Triple Crown. Do you want to maybe give us a bit of background? What made you decide to tackle that and maybe talk us through those 3 events?
Yes. I think when I decided to tackle it, I don't think I had any intention of doing it with the view to, completing the Triple Crown. That seemed quite unreachable at that point. I suppose I came to it because I was in 2020 and 2021. I was in the support crew for a couple of different people's swims, their Taupō swims in January and March of those 2 years. And I really like supporting the swims because it's a good day out, handing people food and getting very, very hot and sweaty on the boat and having a little swim in the
I'm with you on it.
Yes. You can, it's a good day out and you watch someone else work for 14 hours and it gives them some encouragement from time to time. It did look as though the people in the water weren't having quite as much fun as I was, at least some of the time. I remember the first one I was in the crew for was when Rebecca Hollingsworth and Bree did their tandem swim, and they did a magnificent job. I mean, the morning started off pretty dark and grim and wavy, but then the day got better, and they did a great job. But I remember they did both seem extremely tired at the end, and it didn't look like it was that much fun for parts of it. And then I was on the crew for John Hancock the following year, And again, I mean, he made a very, phenomenal job of it. But again, it did seem like it was very hard work. It's a very big lake. It's a lot of arms that you have to use in a day.
Lots of strokes.
An awful lot of strokes. Yes, and a bit of kicking here and there, and a big day out. But then Rebecca suggested, and also in 2019 I did the chopper swim. That was my first long swim, and it was great. I had a really good day. I had an amazing kayaker who had never supported a swim before, and he thought that it was actually impossible to swim 20 kilometers. But he had just done the coast to coast. He'd done the coast to coast multiple times. And as it turned out, he was just the best support because he knew a lot about endurance events. And he was just very nice to me all day. And we had a lovely swim. It's very, it was very tidily assisted. So in terms of it being hard work, it was a bit deceptive because I thought, oh, well, if that's 20 kilometers, that's no trouble.
Yeah,
We can do that. Then, of course, the 2021 had to be canned because of the pandemic. And then in 2021, Rebecca suggested that we have a go at doing a tandem Cook Strait crossing. The end of 2020, rather. She suggested that. And we talked to Philip Rush, and he said yes, with a few conditions, like we have to stick together and train together and be cooperative. And we thought, we can manage that. That swim was very delayed because we had a very windy summer. And finally, we got into the sea at the end of March. And you may have read about this elsewhere, but I had quite a day on that swim. It started very well. It was a great start. I mean, we had a lovely swell. We went very fast for the first hour or so. Then we stopped moving altogether for quite a while the tide turned. But then we had some dolphins But I do remember thinking at one point that we seemed to be not really moving towards the South Island. We seemed to be moving in a funny direction. But, I was very naive at that point, and I thought, oh, well. Now, at some point, something went a bit wrong with my nourishment that day, and I really wasn't eating enough. And along the way, I got extremely cold and quite nutty, it must be said. And I don't really remember very much.
Yes.
I don't remember very much of this, but I remember looking up at one point and thinking, oh, that looks like the brothers. I think we've gone a bit off course. And then the next thing I remember is that Phil was shouting at me a lot and telling me if I didn't sort myself out and swim in a straight line, he was going to pull me out. And
yeah, because you were zigzagging a lot, eh?
Yes, and I thought, well, that's very rude. I'm doing a great job here, and then I just swam off in the wrong direction. And the next thing, I think I just swam up to the IRB and said, oh, I have to get out now. And that's really the last thing I can remember. So they hauled me out, and I got a lot of bruises being hauled out. And luckily, Rebecca was able to finish despite all my antics. I didn't realize until later that there's about 3 hours of swimming that I have no recollection of, as well as the being put into the boat part that I can't really remember. And it was quite. So that's my big hypothermia story.
So hypothermia, yeah.
Yes, and I think it was because I hadn't been taking on I hadn't been taking on enough nourishment for the amount of effort, and then obviously just got very cold and had to be. I have to say, warming up from that was worse than any warming up from ice swimming. It was really very, very painful.
So I'm assuming they took you from the IRB and popped you onto the bigger boat?
Well, no, because the IRB had to stay with Rebecca because it had got dark at this point as well. So they sent me over to the big boat, and the poor people on the big boat had to haul me in. And I was very
swim to the big boat.
Yes.
Okay.
I think I may have been dropped at some stage. Hence, yeah. Because a couple of days later, I took some photos of the bruises and sent them to the crew and said, "Gosh, I don't know how I got all these. These are amazing."
Hey, can I get a discount for these bruises?
So that was the first experience, and it was psychologically a little bruising as well, because it ended rather painfully, and also I felt terrible because I thought I'd really almost completely messed up Rebecca's swim as well. As it turned out, the day was the tide and the current on that day, they were quite spectacular. We went in all manner of directions and swam a very long way. So it was a remarkable day. I was talking to the navigator when I was on another swim, and he said that was one of the bizarrest tides he had seen. So anyway, it was memorable, the bits that I can remember. We had dolphins, and that was great. But luckily, Phil decided he'd let me have another go. I wasn't going to ask him because I thought I've really messed this up and that will be that. But he said, no, we've got to sort this out and do it again. So we had a slightly different plan for more hot drinks, different food, slightly different preparation. And he was thinking, we'll go, maybe January 2022. I thought that sounds good. So I did my 6-hour swim in November 2021 and then told him all about it. And he said, that sounds great. There's a tide next week, so let's do it. And I think it was in 2 weeks from then. And so we did. And I have to say, it was a pretty rough day at the start. I was a bit dubious about getting into the sea, but it all went very well. The drinks were good. I was never cold. I was never hungry. And we fetched up on the other side in just over 9 hours. So yeah, that was. I was quite stressed the whole time. I thought, something's going to go wrong because I had this worst case scenario in my head. And but I think that was quite motivating. I thought, well, we'll just keep going and hope that.
Yeah. So what did you change, sort of feed wise? What did you do on the feeds?
So we swapped to having all hot drinks, so that all my drinks would be warm, and that would keep me warm on the inside.
Yep.
And I did some more research into food, and tried to work out the sort of best, how would you describe it? The best hit of calories and carbs that I could put together. I didn't really want to only eat, commercial preparations, sports nutrition. I did want to eat my own, food. And I did a lot of reading on the Marathon Swimmers Forum. And of course, there, some people say, you must only drink. And other people say, you must only eat this. And other people say, well, if you want a muffin along the way, you can have one. It's fine. Yeah. So I thought that sounded like a good middle ground. And I made all these little pouches that had mashed banana, maple syrup, and lemon juice in them. And they're really delicious. They're very tasty. And they had exactly the right number of carbs and calories for each half hour. And I had some other things as well. But that seemed to work very well. And I've been eating those ever since while swimming, not the rest of the time. But
So that sounds pretty good. Yeah, it's kind of an interesting thing, that whole nutrition. So I was talking to Brian because he's got a big swim coming up, and he's been, he's done the theoretical. This is what I should eat, and he says, and that's fine for about 12 hours, and then you can't face it anymore. So no matter what it is, you can have the perfect sort of thing, but you need to have the variety as well, because you kind of got to feed your mind as well as your body, right?
Yeah, exactly. The other thing I have is some lightly, but not quite steamed, but sort of steamed kumara, slices of that, and that's very tasty. It's very refreshing. It's not too sugary, and it's easy to chew and digest. So I have the banana, I have the slices of kumara. What else do I have? Some snack balls, although they don't work quite so well in the salt water. They're a bit chewy and a bit dry. And also some jelly snakes or dinosaurs for a little treat. And so cycling through
not the aeroplanes. You don't do jelly aeroplanes?
No, they're a bit big. No, the dinosaur is the perfect size, I've found. The snakes aren't so good because they can get stuck in your throat, but the dinosaurs are pretty good.
Yeah, because you can just bite their heads off.
Exactly, yeah. 2 chews and they're down, yeah.
but it's funny how when you get cold, like the ability to chew and actually get that food down is quite hard, eh?
It is. I think that's why I like having the hot drinks, because that you start your feed with a hot drink, and that just relaxes your mouth and it feels nice, and then you can follow that up with the food, have another little sip of drink, and then off you go. So so that worked very well for Cook Strait. I finished and I was in good shape. I wasn't too cold. Had a nice cup of tea on the boat, and that was great.
Sounds almost civil. Sounds quite proper.
It was.
Well done.
Yes.
Yeah. Nice.
I remember the navigator gave me a biscuit, and it was sort of a lemony biscuit to go with my tea. And when you've had salt in your mouth for 9 hours, a lemony biscuit does not taste nice. So I didn't have that. But, I appreciated the gesture, but the cup of tea was perfect.
Nice.
And so that was the Cook Strait done and dusted. And
so that was number one of the Triple Crown.
Yeah. And then I was thinking about what to do next. I wasn't really sure. And then once again, I was crewing another swim when Rebecca did her double crossing of Taupō in 2022.
Yeah.
And I spent a very long time on the IRB overnight in the dark, which is actually, it's an amazing thing to do, being down at the bottom of the lake at 2 a.m. It's beautiful. It's peaceful. There's this poor person working away in the water next to you. And as we were sitting there, Phil said, well, what do you want to do next? And I hadn't really thought about that. I thought I had peaked. And but well, what is there now? And he said, well, I think you should think about Foveaux, because you spend a lot of time in the sea. You don't mind the cold so much. We've worked out how to deal with the cold, and that will be a good swim to do. So we put that in the calendar for January 2023. Of course, the summer of 2023 was remarkable for being full of cyclones and lots of really bad weather. So January came and went, and February came and went, and there were no windows for Foveaux. It was just too windy. Every time I looked at Wind Hub, all the area around Invercargill was just purple all the time. And then finally, right at the end of March, I mean, I hadn't really been worried. I thought, well, if we do it, we do it. And if we don't do it, we don't do it. But hopefully I'm ready for whatever happens. And we also had quite a few very good southerlies here in Wellington in March that year. And the water cooled down a bit and the air was pretty chilly. So I was pretty well prepared for what might happen.
From a training perspective,
Yeah, exactly. So I had a very good summer, just, training and getting ready. And then right at the end of March, there was a weather window for the 1st of April, as long as I didn't mind starting on the mainland and swimming to the island, which is what people used to do back in the 20th century. But no one in the 21st century had done that. So it was a new thing for the skipper, John. But we thought, oh, well, I'd rather give it a go than not do it. So we flew down to Invercargill, and on the 1st of April, April Fool's Day didn't seem like a very auspicious time to embark on this adventure. And also it was pretty cold in Invercargill. I think when Grania and I arrived, it was 4 degrees. The air temperature was 4 degrees at Invercargill Airport, which made me a little nervous.
Wow.
Yes. The next morning it was, I think it was 6, but the water was about 15. So and so off we went from a big rock somewhere near Bluff. And that was a very good swim day. I think that was my favourite swim day ever. Everything went very smoothly. All my food was nice. The weather was good. Well, actually, the weather wasn't so good. It kept raining on the crew, but that didn't bother me. I didn't really notice. We had some rainbows and, nice gentle swell. I saw lots of fish. I saw some big toothy fish, and then we made it to Stewart Island. So that was great. I did get dumped on a rock I got dumped on a rock when we arrived, which was a bit painful. I wasn't aware quite how big the swell was behind me, So I went cruising into these rocks, and then suddenly there was this big crash on my head, and I thought, oh, this is not so good, because there were very pointy rocks that are right under my face.
Well, at least you had evidence of touching the rock, I suppose, when you went back to the boat, right?
Well, the rock, I chose a really good rock, I have to say. It was an amazing rock. It actually had a little seat carved into it by the weather.
Yeah.
So I sat on my rock for a while and thought about what I had done. And Mike and Phil were making urgent gestures from the IRB saying, come back before you get wiped out. So, so in between waves, I made my way back. I did get quite cut feet and knees. Once I was pulled back onto the boat, there was quite a lot of blood, but it was only superficial, and we didn't have to worry about sharks by then. And so that was I have to say, that was just an amazing day out. I was very nervous before it because I thought, this is big cold sea, and I've got all these people down here in Invercargill to help me, because Grania was there as my number one crew person, and then we had Mike and we had Phil, and we had Phil's friend Nick from Dunedin, and we had John the skipper. So it seemed like a pretty big enterprise, all for me. And I thought, well, I better not mess this up. That would be embarrassing. Let all these good people down. But it just all went together beautifully. So I'm very, very happy with that day. And and
there
then
was like 9.5 hours, similar time.
9:21. Yeah.
Gotcha.
So Cook Strait was 9:15, Foveaux was 9:21.
Okay.
And so that just left one more.
Has anybody done it in that same direction after you again?
Yes, Brett, I think, did the same direction last year.
The same direction.
Richardson. Yeah.
Okay.
I'm pretty sure he did. And John just did it John Curley just did it last week or the week before, and he went the other way. So
yes,
it was good to see. Yeah.
Yes.
But I think swimming to the island seems to work pretty well. And I certainly had a good time doing it. So, as long as the wind is behind you, I think that probably makes it much easier, more pleasant.
Well, I suppose the only time you really qualify as being an expert, Corrina, is if you go back and swim from the island to the mainland, and then you can compare notes and let us know.
Yeah, I'm not sure that's really in my immediate.
Okay.
I don't want to spoil the wonderful experience I had going one way. I mean, it would actually be an amazing thing to do, but I'm quite happy with just the one. I think quite a lot of build up to that, and and that just left one more, and we did that in February last year. I think really that the lake was the one I was the most worried about, because it did seem a very long way. 40 kilometres is a long way. And, I'd seen by this stage quite a few people doing it, because, of course, I'd been on Rebecca's double and also Victoria's one way. So I think I had seen all the different places where people tend to suffer a bit on that swim. The lake. Yes. And which I think it was good to have seen that, but also it's quite overwhelming, because you think, well, I'm not sure, do I want to suffer that much misery? But why not? Let's give it a go. And once again, I think that swim, the beginning, I found very difficult when it was dark and choppy. But as we went on, it sort of got easier in a way, which seemed a bit peculiar. But we were past the island after a certain amount of time, and that was very reassuring. And then the bit that people often find difficult, I think, which is between the island and the point, that big section, I mainly just kept my eyes shut so I wouldn't know how far away we were, and just kept going. And then suddenly the point was there, and I thought, oh, well, this is good. And interestingly, I think I enjoyed the second half of the swim much more than the first half, because I thought, well, I've done 20. That was okay. It's just another 20. That's fine. We'll just keep going. And the second half I really enjoyed. The final 1,500 meter sprint, I didn't enjoy so much. That was.
Why did you have to sprint?
Well, we were cruising along, and I was aware that there had been a certain amount of delaying in the delivery of my snacks because I could
Yeah.
see Rebecca's watch, and it said that we were having 40-minute gaps instead of 30 minutes. And I
Yeah.
thought, oh, well, they must have a plan. And I was waiting for my very important final feed, which involves a Mars bar and some flat Coke, which
Yeah.
I was really excited about. And this was
Yes.
not delivered.
Oh,
Went on, and it was not delivered. I thought, well, this is bad. This means we must have more feeds.
yeah.
Yes. And then Phil stopped me and he said, right, you've got 1,500 meters. And if you do it in under half an hour, you'll finish in under 13 hours. So get going.
So
And
you did that without your Mars bar.
I did. Yes. It was
Wow.
quite, yeah, I know. It was
That's
not,
impressive. Yeah.
I felt quite deprived and a little resentful. Everyone was, yelling and shouting at me from the boat and making me go faster. And I thought, well, you haven't fulfilled your side of the bargain.
yeah, exactly. I would have
But,
gone on shock actually for that piece of chocolate that after 12 hours in the water, I stop 100 meters from the end. I'm not finishing it. So that was the reason for the sprint, was to get in at under 13 hours.
Yes. I felt that I was going absolutely like a rocket. I was quite amazed at my speed.
Yeah.
I then saw a video of this final stretch, and I seemed to be going in slow motion, which was a bit disappointing. It certainly didn't feel that way, but it was, it was amazing. It's a tremendous swim to finish because there are lots of people around in the bay, and the big sailing ship goes past, and they toot at you, and it's pretty. Of course, then you fetch up on the beach, and everyone just stares at you like, "Who is this lunatic?"
Yes. What is this crazy woman doing without her
is
Mars
this
bar?
Yes, exactly. What was lovely is we actually found one of our Wellington washing machines on the beach, and
Ah,
he had heard that I was finishing, and he was on holiday up there, Mark. So he just strolled down to the beach to see what was going on. And as I staggered out of the water, I looked up and saw him, and I thought, oh, I must be hallucinating. That looks like Mark from Wellington. And in fact, it was. And that was amazing. And he went off and he bought us all ice creams, which was fantastic. And we sat on the side of the lake and ate an ice cream, which was a pretty good end to the day.
yeah.
The other nice thing in the lake is that it's good to finish the swim without being cold because, it's lovely and warm and the gorgeous sunny afternoon. So it felt quite normal. I didn't look very normal, but I felt quite normal. And so that was the lake, and then that was the Triple Crown done. Yeah,
Nice.
but that's,
Well
as I
done.
say, it hadn't really been my plan to do that, but now I have, so that's good. Yeah.
Awesome.
Mm.
That's pretty cool. I must admit, I got given a washing machine swim hat, which I still treasure after we were down at St. Bathans. And it's one of the ones that I use on some of my training sessions when I know that I'm going to get smashed, because I think if I put that on, I can't disgrace the people who gave it to me.
Yes. No, it's a good one to pop on if you're going to be in a washing machine. You may as well be wearing the correct headgear, I think.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So since then, or maybe even while you're doing that, you've been doing a bit of support swimming. So Duncan's done quite a lot of support swimming as well, and you've been out there with Mary. Do you want to just give us a bit of a sort of what it's like from your side to swim with Mary, and just being the whole support swimmer sort of side of things? Maybe just start off by explaining who Mary is to the listeners.
For the listeners, so Mary is Mary Fisher, who is, I would say, one of our national treasures. She is a multiple Paralympic medalist, para world champs medalist, several world records, a phenomenal swimmer. When I was first back in Wellington and training with Timon's squad, Mary was in the adjacent lane training for Rio. And I just used to marvel at, what a phenomenal swimmer she is. I mean, her technique is just beautiful to watch. She did lots of medley, so all 4 strokes just so perfectly executed. So I think it was a real privilege to be able to swim next, in the next lane. That was pretty amazing. And then she went to Rio and she retired a little while after that from international swimming. And then a couple of years ago, she started swimming with the washing machines and, doing tethered swims. And actually, very embarrassingly, I was once swimming out to the 1 kilometre buoy in Wellington Harbour, and she and Alan, who she swims with a lot, were coming back, but I didn't realise they were tied together. And so I thought I could go between them, and we got terribly tangled up, and then I realised who it was, and I was absolutely mortified and apologised a lot because I couldn't believe I had just done that. No one was hurt, I don't think, but it was very embarrassing. And at that point, she swam a lot with Alan and also with Nancy, who you would have met at St. Bathans.
Yeah.
And we did a few swims together. I was very nervous because I thought, I've got this, icon of the sport tied onto me by a bungee cord. This is quite an epic responsibility.
Yeah.
And, making sure we didn't crash and nothing happened, and we both ended up on the beach safe and sound afterwards. But I mean, Mary is such a phenomenal swimmer. She decided that she was going to come and do the ice swimming at Alexandra last year, and did an amazing job at that. And I think it was shortly after that we thought, well, both of us need a new challenge. And I had never done a 10-kilometre race, and neither had she, because she did, medleys. It was not her focus.
Cool swimming, yeah.
And we thought, well, we've both survived the ice, so why don't we have a crack at this epic 10K? And we started doing quite a lot more swimming together. I think from Labour Weekend onwards, in Wellington at Labour Weekend, a bunch of us have now been doing this 30-kilometre thing for a few years now, I think 5 years. Essentially, each day of Labour Weekend, we do 10 kilometres in the pool and in the sea. And it's become a bit of a fixture now. It's a tradition.
Whoa.
And that kickstarts the summer, the training summer, I suppose. And so Labour Weekend last year, Mary and I did a 5-kilometre swim together round to Ballina Bay and back. And we also did quite a long swim over at Wersa Bay, doing laps between there and Seatoon. And that was the start of our serious training. We've done quite a lot more since then. We did 2 8.5-kilometre tethered swims. Both of them ended up being in very inhospitable conditions. The forecast didn't turn out how it said it was going to. So it was a bit grueling in both instances. And I did feel a bit guilty for putting her through this torture. And but also, it's an amazing privilege to be trusted to guide her. So I'm very happy to do that. And and then we went off to Epic, and it all turned out pretty well. I think the only downside was that Mary was getting over a cold and I was getting a cold. So we weren't really both in the, tip-top condition on the day. I think probably if we'd both been fully healthy, we would have gone a bit faster, but we were very happy just to get around, and it all went very well. In terms of swimming on the tether, we fit together quite nicely. We don't hit each other very often, just every now and again our hands collide. I think in the sea, the tricky thing is not so much that one person is slightly behind the other, but that the sea moves you apart sideways. So there's quite a bit of sideways movement, and that requires a bit more balance to, stay together and not get pulled apart.
So where's the tether attached? Waist or ankles?
Yeah, I put mine. So I wear I'm mainly when we're training, I'm wearing a toe float. So I attach the tether to the belt of the toe float, and Mary wears her end of the tether round her leg, round her just above the knee, and that seems to work pretty well. And I think it's about 1.2 meters long, and it's a bungee, so it's got a bit of give
Bit
it.
of stretch. Okay.
Yeah, we did once. There was one day when she didn't bring the bungee. It was in someone else's car, And so we just used an extra tow float belt as the tether. And without it having any give in it, that didn't work quite so well. It was a bit painful for both of us. So
Sure. Okay.
yeah, you do need a bit of elastic.
And I'm assuming you've got a bit of a routine where you either always swim sort of on the left and she's on the right, or whatever the case might be. I'm assuming there's a preference to which side you breathe, or so that you can look at her while you're swimming, or how does that work?
Yeah, she always, so far, Mary has always gone on my left. I always breathe to the left in the sea anyway, because otherwise I'd go round in circles. So I can always see her. We did suddenly think before Epic that depending on the direction of the course, we might have to change, because if we had to turn around the buoys to her left, that would be a bit tricky if I was on the other side. So but then we checked the course again and realized it was clockwise, so it was fine for me to be on her left and I could steer us around the buoys. We've never tried going on the other side. Probably at some point we should try that just to see if it works. But we haven't so far.
And are you? Do you sort of lead? Are you a stroke or two ahead of her, and she's almost following your lead, or the other way around, or how do you change direction?
Yeah, so
Do you talk to each other?
Yes, so she's mainly sort of level with my hip, I would say.
Yeah.
So with my left hip. So I'm a couple of strokes, or sort of a stroke ahead, but we stay pretty much in sync the whole time. So she's not really following me as such, but is just slightly behind. And that seems to work out pretty well with our respective speeds and everything. I was quite conscious that for the 10 kilometre that, obviously I suppose this is the same for any support swimming, you have to be confident that you'll be able to, stay comfortably as the leader or the guide. You don't really want to be falling behind the person that you're guiding. So that was a consideration. I just had to make sure that I was a bit fitter so that I could, be confident about not going under. And then in the event itself, Mary wore a tow float just so that the other swimmers would be aware that she was there. And also in the event that something might happen to me, that the safety people could instantly see where we were and help out. So that worked pretty well. We didn't get tangled up with the tow float.
So, Corrina, being a support swimmer, how much harder do you have to work? I mean, it might not be necessarily in the swimming, but you've got to concentrate on the person that you're with. Does it take a little bit more mental effort or even physical effort to do some of this? Or how do you find it?
I think, I think it does take a bit more physical and mental effort, because you are directly responsible for someone else. And of course, with Mary, if something happened to me, she would be very vulnerable in the sea. So I feel that it doesn't weigh upon me, but I'm just conscious that I have to be very alert and make sure that we're always going in the not going in the wrong direction, that we're always going in the right direction. So it means, for navigation, I'm probably more careful than I would be on my own. I mean, also, you don't want to make someone else swim further than they have to. We're quite keen on the getting between 2 points in the most direct direction, straightest line. We don't want to swim any more than we have to. So, I think that is a responsibility. And I'm not very good at when we're doing our long swims at keeping Mary appraised of where we are. What I would tend to do is, with a kilometre to go before we got to, the end of the first leg, I'd say, we've got about 800 metres now. And, that's an indication. When we were finishing Epic, I was swimming along, and I just I hadn't been looking at my watch, but I did manage to see it when it said that we were on 9,800 meters exactly. And I thought, oh, that's pretty good. So I just tapped her on the shoulder and said, oh, Mary, we've got 200 meters to go and then we're done. So let's do it. And we did a pretty good, strong finish. I think for the epic, because we were doing that rectangular course, it was easier for Mary to know where we were because of going around the tight corners that, each end of the lap. And so we knew where we were. And I think that actually the beginning of the epic race, because the sun was very bright and there were people everywhere, I started and I suddenly thought, oh, I can't see any of the turn buoys. I don't know where we're going. And this is a bit scary. But it all, after a couple of laps, it all sort of settled down, and I knew where I was pointing. So yes, I think there is quite a big element of extra awareness that you have to have, and also of other people. If people are coming towards us and aren't aware of where we are, we have to go around them. But we haven't had any big crashes yet.
If it makes you feel any better, my daughter was a lifeguard in the IRBs at the Epic, and she could see you guys the whole way, and the boats were all in contact and comms with each other, talking about you and Mary. So you guys were in good hands. You were completely safe all the time. Yeah.
Yes. Yeah. It was a beautifully run event. I think it was very easy. We asked about the tow float and they said, oh, sure, that's fine. And, the safety is really good. So that's nice to hear. Thank you.
Absolutely.
Please thank her as well.
Yeah, absolutely, man. What does your bucket list look like?
Well, you mean in general or the swimming bucket list?
Oh, I think in general would be nice to know, but yeah, swimming in particular as well.
Yes. Well, what's on my list next? So I have just entered for St. Bathans this coming July, which is exciting. And I'm going to have another crack at the mile and maybe the long mile, the big mile.
Extreme mile, there you go.
The extreme mile. So I emailed Susan the other day and said, I have this in mind. What do you think? And she said yes. So we have a little plan instated now for that.
Awesome.
And that I hope will be good. I mean, I think seeing you and Susan swim at Alexandra doing your giant swim I haven't quite got to grips with that yet. It was so monumental. And
listen, if I can do that, you can do double, right? So I'm looking forward to seeing you swim, and I will help you as much as I can.
Okay. It was, I think watching you do that in the swimming pool, because I have to say in the 1K in the swimming pool, I did find that there were a lot of lengths to do. And the 500 was fine. That was all over. For the 1K, I thought, well, I'm not going to look at the numbers until I think I've done about 300 meters, just to check that I was actually still mentally aware. And the first time I looked up, I thought, oh, that's good. I'm counting pretty well. I've done 300 meters. Excellent. Cool. I have to say the next 300 meters seemed to take a very long time.
Yeah. No, I agree with you.
Yeah, that was pretty grueling. I mean, the final 200 was fine. That was pretty good, but it did seem like an awful long way to go. And I thought, gosh, you were doing twice that and more. That was a lot of up and down.
Is that every time you turn, there's an opportunity to think about, why am I doing this? Should I stop? Whereas when you're in a lake and you've got, I don't know, one last lap of 300 meters to go, or whatever, you're going 300 meters, right? So for me, it does seem easier in a lake, I must be honest. So I don't know. Well, all I know is that there were stretches of that swim that I can't remember either. So similar to your Cook experience. Yeah. But we'll be there looking after you. So that's exciting. That's good to hear. Nice.
Yeah, I think because I remember last time at St. Bathans, I thought, well, I found the 500 quite hard. The 1 kilometre was better because I was more used to it. And I remember thinking, well, as long as I can make it back to the end of the kilometre and turn to go out for the next 600 metres, it will be fine. And and then it was actually in the mile. The turnaround wasn't too bad. And then it was just a matter of finishing. So hopefully, fingers crossed, it will be the same this year. And I just have to go that tiny bit further. But I suppose when you're in the lake, you don't really...
And then play the violin.
Yes.
Yes.
Yes. Yes. We're not going to forget
that. Cameron, who was down at Alexandra, he is also a musician. He plays the viola. And I didn't realise that, but just after I got back to Wellington, we get the Otago Daily Times at the library, and there he was on the front page with a whole bunch of musicians and his viola. So if he's coming to St. Bathans, we could practically, we could have a post-ice mile jam.
Well, Jim played that little triangle thing when he was in primary school, so we can have a concert.
Oh, yeah. Okay, well, I think this has been an awesome chat, Corrina. Thank you so much for your time. We have previously chatted to Mary, so it's going to be good to see or listen to what happens, things from the other side. So yeah, that's awesome. You're an amazing person, an amazing swimmer. So I really appreciate this chat with you.
Yes. Oh, thank you so much for inviting me. It was funny because I remember seeing the message from Duncan a long time ago, just after I did Taupō, and I thought, oh yes, I must get onto that. I think after that swim, I was a little bit tired for a few months, and a lot of things sort of got away from me a little bit. And then one day I was just searching through messages for something else, and there you were, and I thought, oh, I better reply to that. So I did.
It was about 3 months after, but that's all good. We understand, Corrina. Thank you.
Yes, I'm not quite sure what happened. I must have gone into a time warp, I think. But it's been so nice to talk to you, and also to hear about the perspective of the safety at Epic last week.
Yeah.
And and I'm looking forward to seeing you down south in a few months.
Yep. We will definitely see you down there. We're going to see you up at Rangitoto as well for your Rangitoto circumference, right?
Yes, that's right. That's the other thing that's coming up quite soon. So I'm excited about that because I've never done a circumnavigation before. I've gone between two places, but I've never gone around something. So that will be fun. I'm excited about that.
It will be lots of fun, and it will be warm, and it will be cool. There will be no pain, no zigzagging, and you will love it.
Okay. Yeah, I'm looking forward to it.
Perfect. Corrina, you are such a lady. You always make me feel a little rough around the edges, but it's been really, really cool to chat to you. Thank you so much for your time. And we'll see you in the water, yeah?
Yeah. Lovely to see you both and talk to you.
Thank you. Great. Thanks, Corrina.
Thank you, Corrina. Well, that was the Clever Dicks podcast, hosted by myself, Jim West, and Duncan Cookard. As always, we'd appreciate any comments or suggestions that you may have. It may be people to interview or topics to cover. If you want to send us some comments, you could use email and go to cleverdicksnz@gmail.com or drop us a comment on Instagram at clever_dicks. If you did enjoy this episode, please tell your friends about it. It'll really help us grow the podcast. See you in the water. Bye.